Today we are here to talk about the hidden dangers and challenges facing our youth and children. Because this is one of the greatest things that our society is concerned about. Because we know and we understand there are a lot of dangers around us. Now, in this picture, I've put up some icebergs. And the thing about icebergs is you see one portion above the water. I see ourselves as a community, as a church, as this little ship trying to navigate through the waters. And then we see this iceberg and we say, okay, we need to stay away from the iceberg. But here's the truth and here's the reality of an iceberg. What you see outside is not what's beneath the surface, because what's beneath the surface is something completely different. So when we say hidden dangers and challenges, all of us have heard the different challenges that are there. We see the tip of the iceberg, but sometimes it's good to go under the surface and to see what exactly we are faced with, what exactly our children and our youth are faced with. And so today, in the time that we have, I'm trying to cover as much as possible. I also see children being mentored by parents and Sunday school teachers. So there has always been a question, parents versus Sunday school teachers, who should teach children about God? I think that it takes a whole church to raise a child. There's an African proverb that says it takes a whole village to raise a child. We are a people of community. A church is a place of both society and spiritual activity. So it's a community. So parents do have the primary role, but the teachers play a very important role in the mentoring of children. And so today, all of you are teachers. At the same time, many of you are parents. And hopefully this seminar will be useful to you. Today, we are going to talk about hidden dangers and challenges. I have just chosen a few. We'll briefly cover some of these topics: addictions, depression, bullying, obesity, peer pressure, sexual activity, and social media. So this is just a few that I've chosen, which I think will be relevant for us. So all of us here in the US, there are multiple challenges as being here in the US. First of all, we have the cultural challenge. And secondly, there is a unique challenge with immigrant communities. But in the US, the teens only statistics, this is just about addiction, just to start off with. The average first use is before 14 years. So before 14 years, the average first use of tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana is a threat and a danger. Now, when it comes to addictions have long-term problems, the health problems, memory disorder, anxiety, depression, and it affects their jobs, it affects their career, there's relationship problems. So we are talking about a danger that will probably affect a child's realm completely, spiritually, mentally, socially. Alcohol, for example. I'm just going to quickly touch on these things because it is important for teachers and all of us to know the dangers that our children are faced with. Now, many of these things, they start off, they think it's harmless, it's a party, we're all having fun. The first time a teen or somebody gets into any alcohol or any drug use, they don't realize that they're getting entangled in something that can destroy their career and destroy their life. Alcohol is, the brain of a youth is more vulnerable to damage because of alcohol. There's increased risk of numerous problems. Let's talk about tobacco. Alarming levels of tobacco. There has been a decrease in cigarettes, but there's been an increase in vaping and e-cigarettes. Vaping is something that is really a threat now because it's very easy to hide. There's no smell about it. So the youth and teens, they see this as an extremely secretive way to carry on any kind of addiction. There are currently, it says 5 million youth are using e-cigarettes. That is, the numbers have increased over the past year. One of the most dangerous addictions that is coming up is marijuana. Now, in some states, they've legalized it. Other states, they have it for medical purposes. Now, I just want to also say something to our immigrant parents. We as immigrant parents, we have a different way of parenting. And sometimes we think that our children are immune. Not all, but some parents. I remember a few years ago, a family came to me and they told me their son was in deep addiction problems. And they also told me, brother, you had come to our church many years ago and you were talking about this and we just did not pay attention to you. Because when you were talking, we thought you're talking about some other kids. We never thought that our own kid will get into something like this. We feel, in our community, we feel that we have a control over our children. Yes, we do when they're young. And one of my greatest concerns is for parents with young children. They don't seem to pay attention to these things. As our children grow older and when you have teens, yes, the parents suddenly get serious about understanding these things. But it would be wonderful if the parents with younger children are able to pay attention to these things. So this seminar, one of the challenges that we have is to get our parents who have younger children to understand and to know and to be aware of the challenges. Marijuana, for example. Here are some of the arguments that teens give. Weed is natural. It's not like heroin or cocaine. It's not processed, it's natural. Well, there are a lot of things that's natural. There are poisonous mushrooms that's natural. Just because it's natural does not mean it's harmless. So that's an argument that they say. Then they say that everyone is using weed. These are just different excuses that our young people give. They say weed helps you to focus. No, it does not. Marijuana can cause serious long-term problems. There have been studies that talk about how marijuana can cause psychosis and numerous psychiatric disorders. I have seen families who have come to us for help. I'm talking about youth here in this country, immigrant youth. And marijuana has affected their minds so horribly. So one of the excuses they say is marijuana is not addictive. They say nobody has died of a marijuana overdose. That may be true. Nobody will die of a marijuana overdose, but it will kill you slowly. Marijuana now is becoming a very serious problem. Awareness is very important because if the perception of harm decreases, then marijuana use increases. So if you are teen, if our youth are not aware of the dangers of marijuana or drugs or alcohol, if they take it casually, then they are in greater danger of indulging. The common signs of addiction in teens. The National Institute on Drug Abuse have reported that 70% of teens have tried alcohol by their senior year in high school. 50% have abused an illegal drug. Now the common signs of addiction. This is for parents. Now we pray and that none of our young people would get involved in any of these things. But these are some of the signs. There are mood swings, depression. There are changes in emotions, euphoria, feelings of euphoria. There is unexplained absences. There's a change in appearance. And there is a new social group, new kinds of friends. And there's a lot of secrecy, sleeplessness, change in schedule, hiding the evidence, bloodshot eyes. So when we talk about all these addictions and all these issues that I'm going to talk about, they're all very interrelated. Depression is one of the challenges we're talking today. And depression goes a lot in with addiction. Addiction is a high, and then when the low comes, you can go into depression. Now it says that an estimated 20% of teens will experience depression before reaching adulthood. And 15% of the teens who suffer with depression, they will eventually develop bipolar disorder. Now, these are psychiatric terminologies, and psychiatry is a very deep subject. And I have also seen in my 17 years of work that sometimes we are hasty to go for psychiatric help. I want to be very careful how I say this. Psychiatry is a very good field to help people who have chemical imbalance in the brain. And a lot of people who are born with chemical imbalances or who develop chemical imbalances, psychiatry does help. But there is a problem when somebody is using drugs or alcohol and they exhibit some symptoms. If you rush to a psychiatrist, then a psychiatrist will try to put them into a box of symptoms. And I have seen a lot of young people who start taking medication that they don't really need. What they really need is come out of their drugs and alcohol. So I just want to give an alert. Be careful before you go to a psychiatrist for any help. See first if there's any addiction involved in the young person's life. Because if there is, then let's trace out and see if some of the depression, some of the anxiety is from drug use. They may not need the psychiatric help. So the effects of teen depression. Now, depression is something that is really plaguing our young people. I wish our teachers, I wish they would know more. You know, the teens, they're living in a very pressured environment. I would really ask all of us to be compassionate to our young people. Yes, they have disobediences, they are naughty. We understand that. I want you to understand it's a pressure system out there. The teens that go through depression, they have problems at school, low energy. Some of them talk of running away because they feel like nobody understands. Sometimes they get into alcohol and drug abuse because it's a way to self-medicate their depression. Low self-esteem, and that can trigger other things. Later on, we will be talking about some of the peer pressure. Internet addiction, they're trying to escape their problems. All these dangers are very interlocked. The challenges that parents have in recognizing depression. Now, it's very important for us to identify depression. Parents say sometimes it's hard to tell the normal ups and downs from depression. Youth are very good at hiding feelings. Some parents say we don't talk that much about feelings. 7% of them say we don't spend that much time talking with our youth. And others say we are not sure of the signs of depression. So in today's seminar, we are just alerting ourselves that depression is a real challenge. It's a real danger for our youth. Now, some of the signs and symptoms of this issue, again, as I said, many of these things are connected. Substance abuse, reclusive behavior. Suddenly, if you see the teen who was just lively, outgoing, and suddenly they become very reclusive, very withdrawn. Yes, there is, moving from childhood to adolescent and into adulthood, there are some changes in multiple levels. So sometimes it gets a little difficult to understand, but we should always pay attention. Teachers, you have an excellent opportunity because you're meeting them once a week or twice a week. And so you can see the changes. The children who are just very energetic are suddenly becoming withdrawn. And I understand the challenges that teachers have because usually the talkative children get the attention and sometimes the silent ones don't get our attention as much. But if we are intentional and if you have a group of 10 or 15 children, pay some attention to these really quieter ones and observe them. Suspicious injuries, using the blade and different things to cut themselves, that's more common than we think it is. Severe anxiety, mood swings. So these are some signs and symptoms of depression. Now, teen girls are 3 times more likely to experience depression as boys, and you can just imagine why. The pressure that our children have to look a certain way. With today's social media and Facebook and all the things that's out there, our children are under so much pressure to be a certain way, to look a certain way. And so studies have shown that teen girls are 3 times more in danger of experiencing depression. Now that leads us to another one called bullying. Do you know bullying is one of the greatest dangers that we have? And many times we have no clue, especially immigrant children. They face a lot of challenge in schools. Now I know some children are tough. There's a personality aspect also in this. There are tough children, they are able to handle it. There are children who are softer. There are children who are more sensitive. Some children try to stay away. They isolate themselves. Again, it depends on which neighborhood you are. Different neighborhoods have different challenges. But bullying is a real problem. Bullying can be in different ways. Of course, there's physical, hitting and physical abuse. But threatening, intimidating, teasing and taunting, name calling, making sexual remarks. And nowadays we have a lot of these race-based problems. And parents, you would not imagine the kind of language that is there in the schools. Using the race, using the background, using the ethnicity. And so our children, they leave in the morning, they go out there, they come back, and our homes and our church, our community is to be a safe place. And we have to be very considerate, very sympathetic, very compassionate, because some of the challenges that they have lead them into greater struggles. Here is the truth about bullying. This is the truth about school bullying. 85% of the bullying occurs inside of the school. 82% with learning disabilities have been bullied at school, and 44% of middle schoolers experience bullying problems. There's bullying always going around. Now we'll have to be a little bit careful about bullying, because sometimes when children have a confrontation, that is natural. We have confrontations, we have arguments growing up, and that's the way we develop personality. Arguments, confrontations, disagreements, that's part of the whole thing. But bullying is different. We'll have to find out, we'll have to help our children understand what is bullying and what is conflict. There's a difference. Conflict is, there's a disagreement or argument between two friends and they both express their views. That's a conflict. Bullying is when there's a goal to cause harm. In a conflict, it's two equal friends. Bullying is not equal friends. The person bullying has more power. And in a conflict, generally it will stop and change when they realize that somebody's getting hurt. Bullying it will continue. And so, if we can understand what is bullying and help our children navigate that. See, we don't want to overly protect our children from the challenges. We want them to develop. We want them to grow strong. We want to hold their hand and help them to navigate through the challenges. But we need to be aware. Our children need to have the confidence that we as parents understand the challenges that they have. Now, one of the really sad things today is because of social media, the bullying just does not stop at school. Because children have their phones, now it is cyberbullying. It's 24 hours of the day. And cyberbullying is pretty intense. You have children on Snapchat or instant messaging, email. They have different ways to contact each other, and the bullying goes on. And you can just imagine, with that kind of bullying going on all the time, how would these children handle things? No wonder they go into depression. No wonder they go into anxiety and being withdrawn. No wonder somebody says, hey, you take this thing, this will make you feel good, and then they get into drugs and they start smoking this and smoking that. All interconnected. Cyberbullying. It says 35% of the kids have been threatened online. 58% of them have not told their parents or an adult. Why would a child not tell their parent? Well, maybe they were on a chat platform that you had told them not to be on. So, if they come and tell you that I got bullied, then the first question we are going to ask is, where did you get bullied and why did you go there? And then we are going to pound them for disobedience, right? So, many times they will get into trouble. So it really comes down to how we set up our relationship with our youth. So teachers can play a very important role here. Because I know parents have this, we have to maintain discipline. So if the teachers can provide a safe environment where the youth are encouraged to come, and you can tell the youth, you can come and share with us. And here's something again that we'll have to be very careful. All of you have to, consider what your policies say. Whatever policies you have in your church, you please follow that. But if you can maintain a level of confidentiality, now I know that's a difficult concept for us to speak in our community. If the children can trust the youth, counselors and the teachers, that you will be able to keep some things confidential.
Now I know parents are not going to be happy. They'll say, well, how dare you keep things confidential? You need to tell me. Okay. So if the children know that whatever they tell the teacher is going to go to the parent, then will the children talk to the teachers? No, they will not. So then again, we are in a catch-22 situation here. Because we need the children to be able to have an adult to whom they can talk to. It's very, very important. And so, if the teachers can have a system where you tell the children, if this is going to be harmful, if this is a danger to you, then we have to inform your parents. If there's a threat or a danger to you, we'll have to inform your parents. But otherwise, you can talk to us because we want to help you through this. In fact, parents should be able to do that first. I remember my son, he was in middle school and it was some Black History Month or something. And some kids, they told him, they're talking about your ancestors or some mean comment like that. Now, my son knows that I take these things seriously. I mean, I'm not just going to just sit around. So I went to the principal and I said, okay, that's not acceptable. You need to take action about that. So I told my son about that. I told my son, anything that happens, you come and tell me. Now, I'm not going to overly protect you and, make you weak in those areas. But at the same time, I wanted you to have the confidence that if you come to me, then me as your father, I will come to take care of the situation in whatever capacity. Go to the principal and take care of it. Now, sometimes I understand parents are so busy. Parents also have an extremely stressful life. Our culture, our world, it's a rat race. And so parents are busy themselves. And so we do have some challenges. But in the midst of all this, we want to make time as a community. So again, this is a partnership between parents and teachers. The schools have parent-teacher meetings. I'm sure churches have that. If not, you need to have parent-teacher meetings. We'll have to make the time so that you can discuss some of these things and encourage the parents to pay attention. Later on, we will talk about the different stages of parenting. Bullying, depression, the consequences are really severe. 14% of high school students have considered suicide. Because you come to a point where you feel like nobody understands me. Nobody understands me. The cyberbullying thing, the way because of people having their access to phones. Next I'm going to cover social media addiction, but access to phones. You have the phone all the time. The bully is following you from the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep. And the effects of cyberbullying is the kids get very angry. I mean, they can't get angry at the bully, so they close and they come out into the living room or come into the dining room and they're really mad about something. And then we get on their case and we say, what are you so angry about? Why didn't you be grateful for what you've given? There's humiliation that these kids go through. There's depression. So teaching self-advocacy is very important because all our children should know that they have the ability to create a positive change in the world. So we want to teach them to be able to handle this. And some of the warning signs is that the decline in grades, sleep pattern changes, avoiding school. This is a big telltale sign. Now, if a child is really reluctant, now again, it gets a little difficult because if the child is just being lazy and wanting to stay at home and play video games, that's one thing. But if you pay attention to the patterns, and if you see that they're avoiding school, they don't want to go to school. The child who was very excited to go to school, suddenly they just don't want to go. So you may have to consider, is there any bullying going on? Smartphone addiction. Smartphone addiction. Do you know this is a real addiction now? In South Korea, they have actually publicly announced it as an addiction. Kids are on the phone and they've been trained from a small age. I mean, I know when kids are small, we give them the little cell phone so that they can watch some songs while they eat their food. Yes, that is okay. But the internet, the smartphone industry, all the apps, the video game industry, all of that is geared please understand, there are psychologists who work in these industries. They're geared towards getting your full attention. Video game industry is a multi-billion dollar industry. It's not a small industry. Video games are designed if you want to be successful, then you need to grip the person. I spoke to a family, immigrant family, boy is 15 years old, he took a knife at his mother because he wants to play video games. Wants to play it all night. Because you get so engrossed and caught up in this fantasy world. 50% of teens feel they are addicted to their devices. Well, if 50% of teens feel they're addicted, then that's really a good confession, because they feel that they are there for too long. The thing about this addiction is that it has numerous effects. Psychological effects, social effects. Now, coupled with video game addiction, I'm just going to lead to another one, and this is not usually spoken about much, but obesity. Do you know obesity is a real challenge that children have? And there's a vicious cycle of childhood obesity. It's a cycle. You have a healthy child getting into internet addiction. What does that mean? Less physical activity. Then they become mildly obese. Physical activity reduces. And the cycle leads to severely obesity. Now, what do you think that does to a child? You already heard about bullying. You already heard about depression. What do you think it does to a child who's obese or who has any even mildly obese child, and on top of that you have bullies in school? How do you think that cycle works? Incredible challenges. And many times these children turn to food, because food can give you some pleasure. It does trigger some circuits in the brain, and we have food addiction. That is a serious problem. Food addiction is a problem. And so when children who face these challenges, they turn to food. And then the cycle continues. 1 in 3 children aged 2 to 19 are at the danger of being in the category of mildly obese. 2 out of 3 children don't get any daily physical activity. Yes, in schools they do have, physical activity time, but more and more children are willing to spend hours on their phones away from physical activity. 7 hours, 8 hours on their phone or TV. You can imagine the cycle of obesity that kicks in. And obesity harms children and young people, and you have emotional and behavioral damage. You have school absences. You have stigmatization, bullying, low self-esteem, physical problems, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, breathing difficulties, risk of ill health, and there are a lot of challenges. And once somebody gets into this cycle, it gets quite difficult to come out. Now, we as parents, we as teachers, these are just for our awareness, just for our understanding. Now I want to lead to another challenge that is now increasingly becoming one of the most dangerous things. That's pornography. With every child having a phone in their hands and access to internet, can you imagine? One click, once you are exposed, I usually tell people, once your eyes have been opened, you can't unopen your eyes anymore. You've already seen it. 93% of boys and 62% of girls are exposed to internet porn before the age of 18. Sometimes we as parents, because we are not aware, we don't know. Pornography is extremely damaging, psychologically, physically, in all ways. It's an extremely damaging thing that our children can fall into. Pornography addiction in teenagers. It is a real thing. The average age of first exposure was 14 for males and 15 for females, for boys and girls. Now, I do understand pornography is something that we are not comfortable talking about, and sexual things are not something that many immigrant communities are not comfortable talking about, but it is very important for us, for our churches to carefully consider how we are going to talk about this. Purity, how to keep our eyes clean, how to keep our heart clean, and let the people, our young people, know of the dangers. And what are the dangers? Here are some of the dangers. Imitation and modeling of inappropriate behaviors. There's an unhealthy interference with the normal sexual development process. Lot of emotional side effects. Feelings of guilt, shame, anxiety, confusion. Lot of the kids are exposed to sexual activity. In the schools, kids are watching that on their phones. So they're all exposed to it. Let me give you some statistics, may not be completely applicable to our immigrant community, but it says that by the time their children are in 12th grade, the majority of US high schools students have had 57% of them have involved in sexual activity. Now in our immigrant communities, we have much more stricter rules for our children, so these numbers may not necessarily apply to our children, but these are the average statistics. We don't have necessary statistics just for the immigrant communities, but because we have a stronger and a closer family community, definitely the percentage will be much less. But we want to be aware. Now I want to show you one interesting statistic here, and this was about the influence of religious practice. And it says that youth who were involved in frequent religious practices weekly, the percentages are down. And that's a very good thing for us as a church. Today I'm talking to the church. So when we get our children involved in religious activities, there is a spiritual deterrence. And so that's a wonderful thing that we have this study that has been there. That when we get our children involved in church, getting involved in the Sunday school, getting involved in the youth thing, there is a spiritual effect on our children. We have about 7 minutes and then we're going to take a break. So I'm going to quickly talk about peer pressure. Peer pressure. Our children are being taught and molded. We would like our children to be taught and molded by the home, by the parents, by the church. But they're being taught and molded by the world, and especially by their peers. So it says 23% of teen girls feel pressured to get involved in sexual activity. 55% of teens tried drugs for the first time because they felt pressured by their friends. 55% of them. That's the peer pressure on them that opened their door to drugs. 70% of teens who smoke say they started smoking because their friends smoke, or they felt peer pressure to try smoking. Now, one of the typical phrases that say for peer pressure is, come on, everyone's doing it. And that's the way that they try to marginalize children, especially when you put in bullying. They say, oh, what are you scared about? Oh, you're scared, huh? They have different ways. The pressure, and now on top of that you have social media. So the pressure does not stop at school. The pressure continues from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep. So if I was doing this seminar maybe 5 or 10 years ago, then I would say, well, we have these challenges at school, and then the children come home. Okay, now they have a safe environment. But today, what do I say? Can we say that they have a safe environment when they come home? Because when they come home, again, they're on their phones. They bring the pressures home. They bring the bullying home. They bring the exposure and the potential danger home. Now, one of the things that we have to be very careful is we don't want to do anything in a reactionary way. I know sometimes after a seminar, we have the tendency to go and just be very strict with our kids and say, okay, that's it, we're cutting off everything, no more phones. No, we don't want to do anything reactionary. We don't want to do anything sudden. We'll have to be very careful. Any discipline or any guidelines that you're implementing, it should not be in a reactionary way and a sudden, abrupt way. We definitely want to take into consideration a lot of things. So peer pressure. In the next segment of our seminar, I'll be talking about some of the things that we can do, as parents and teachers. Now, one of the things that we really want to talk about today is the peer pressure and the challenge to our faith. I think that's very important because there's a challenge to our faith. We as the church, we believe in God. We believe that God is the one who created us. And there is a real challenge. Statistics say that children, when they graduate out of high school, I'm talking about church-going children, right? When they graduate out of high school, they graduate out of church. When they go to college, they face the peer pressure where they say, oh, you believe in God? And today, I'm just going to talk about just one thing. Let's talk about evolution, for example. Just one example of the pressure that is there challenging the faith. The theory of evolution. It's taught in schools and colleges everywhere because they say there's scientific proof. Taxpayers are paying for this, that it is taught everywhere, and this is a real threat for our faith. Of course, there are people who try to balance it out and try to say different things. But let me tell you, I'm a student of physics. I love science. It's a theory. There is no proof. As a church, we have to get our children to be very strong on this foundation, because when they go to school and they go to college, they're going to be faced with some of these challenges that challenge the faith. For example, you can look at, these are just simple things. They say that, there was this evolution, the species here and then there's a species here, but in between, they haven't found a single bone of these in-between species. If there are millions of them, where are these species? Where's the evidence? There's no evidence. Let me just tell you about this confession. This is by Dr. George Wald, Nobel Prize winner in physiology and medicine. This is his confession. He said, when it comes to the origin of life, we have only two possibilities as to how life arose. One is spontaneous generation arising to evolution. The other is a supernatural creative act of God. So scientists all agree there's only two possibilities. One is everything came from nothing, or a designer created all this. There is no third possibility. Spontaneous generation, or the theory of evolution, has been scientifically disproved by many scientists. And so this scientist is saying that leads us scientifically to only one possible conclusion, that life arose as a supernatural creative act of God. Now listen to this. What he says is, but I will not accept that because I do not want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in which I know is scientifically impossible. So you understand this. People don't want to believe in God, so they are pushing this. And so the foundation of our faith for our children is very important, because faith plays a very big role in the lives of our children. Now, I want to, before we wrap up real quick, I just want to talk about different kinds of addiction. Usually when we say addiction, we talk about drugs and alcohol, but there are different kinds of addiction. Prescription drugs is now increasingly becoming a very serious addiction. You can get over-the-counter pills. Increasingly, youth are abusing this over-the-counter medications. So prescription drugs is becoming a serious addiction. There are behavior addictions. We spoke about food addictions previously. Internet, social media, video games, I put that under fantasy addictions. Then we have money addictions that usually, as they grow older, if any of them get into gambling, that's that addiction. Then we have love and sex addictions. That's the pornography and other sexual things. And then we have different kinds of behavioral addictions. Now, the factors that contribute to addictions. Here are some of the factors that contribute to these addictions. Family conflict. Now, mostly immigrant families, we have a stronger family system. So family conflict may not be a situation, but if there are families that do have some conflict, if there are families that are separated, then that is a factor. Many kids get into addiction because of curiosity. We spoke about that in peer pressure. Many people, as kids get into because of low self-esteem. Then there's a cultural influence. One of it is parents using. If there are parents who are using any of the substances, then the kids get easily involved in that. Then the absence of a value system. In any case, the challenges that immigrant communities face is slightly different than challenges that other communities face. Each immigrant community has their own challenges, and so we'll have to understand this and contextualize this. But here are some of the things that the youth have responded and said that we would love to have understanding and respect from adults. Respect from adults and understanding. We would love to have more time and involvement from adults. A constructive opportunity to experiment with life. It will be wonderful if adults can help in developing social competence. And that way the church is an excellent place because you have a society, you have opportunities for them to get involved socially, build social relationships. That's a wonderful thing. Youth said we need more empathetic adult youth leaders, and that's exactly what's happening today. Now through this seminar, all the teachers and the youth, now you are understanding the challenges, the hidden dangers and challenges that our youth face. And so that's a wonderful thing because now when we interact with them, we can be more empathetic. We want more opportunities for moral development and help to find the meaning of life. This is just a quick rundown of few of the challenges. Most of the other challenges that our youth face will be interconnected, very interrelated. But if you can have an understanding of this, then I think we can prevent our communities and our societies from getting too close to these icebergs. You know, these icebergs that we see the tip of something. Every family that has come to me for counseling, I'm talking about immigrant families here in the US. When I say immigrant, today I'm talking to Indian families, so this is Indian families. The parents said, we never thought, we had no idea. By the time they find out, they've hit the iceberg. If they had been watching out for the tips of the iceberg, they said, I think there is some behavioral things here. Sometimes we only come to know when things blow out of proportion. When things have come so to an extreme end, that's when we kind of say, oh my goodness, there's an iceberg. But if you are aware, if we pay attention, this seminar today is, because of my work in helping those who struggle with addiction, I'm really passionate about prevention. My passion is my wife and I, we pray every day for my children. They're teens. We pray every day for them because the pressures that they face outside. We parents we can have some understanding, but we really do not know these struggles. Base struggles from ethnicity, skin color. The challenges that they face are numerous challenges. And our children and our teens are trying to fit in. Of course they want to fit in. And so, faced with all these dangers out there, and if that is coupled with lack of understanding from the youth leaders or from home, then suddenly they find themselves alone. And so, these are just the challenges. In the next session, we will talk about some of the things that we can do as a community and maybe understand some of the things. Because one thing is to try to stay away from the iceberg, to try to stay away from the fires. Another thing is to kind of make our kids fireproof. So even though they face some of these challenges, they are strengthened from within. And so that's what we want to do. Yes, we want to stay away from the fires. That is what we want to do. But at the same time, we want to strengthen our youth from within so that they can handle some of these challenges on their own. So we want to take a break now.